Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be looking at something kind of different.
Oh.
We're going to be talking about worst animals.
Worst animals.
Yeah. So we're diving into this top 10 worst animals list.
Interesting. Where'd you find this list?
This is from the website, thetop10s.com. And let me tell you, it is a wild ride.
I bet.
Yeah, and it's clear right away that this list is like totally from a human perspective, you know?
Right.
It's all about like fear and disgust and just like inconvenience, you know?
Absolutely. It's a classic example of anthropocentrism. You know,
Yes.
humans judging the entire animal kingdom based on our own limited experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So before we like totally dissect this list,
Okay.
I'm curious what makes an animal bad to you?
Hmm.
Like what criteria would you use to rank them? Keep that in mind as we go through this list because it's really fascinating to see what makes the cut.
Okay.
And maybe more importantly, what doesn't. And no surprise here, the undisputed champion of worst animal, according to this list, is the mosquito.
Yeah, the stats on mosquito-borne illnesses are pretty alarming, you know.
Oh.
Malaria, dengue fever,
Right.
Zika. These aren't just itchy bites. We're talking serious public health threats.
Yeah.
In fact, the source even claims that mosquitoes have killed more humans than all wars combined.
Wow, that really puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I totally get it. They're annoying. Their bites can be dangerous.
Right.
But on the other hand, it makes you think, right,
Yeah.
we judge these animals based on our own limited experiences.
Yeah.
We forget that we're part of this like interconnected ecosystem.
Exactly. In the grand scheme of things, mosquitoes play a role even if it's one we find unpleasant.
Yeah.
You know, their larvae are a food source for fish and other aquatic creatures, and some species even help with pollination.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe we need to be a little more nuanced in our worst animal assessment.
A little bit.
Speaking of nuance, this list also includes humans.
Oh, a touch of self-awareness.
Right.
And the arguments they make are pretty thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Environmental damage, violence, conflict, our questionable treatment of other species.
Right.
It's a pretty sobering indictment of humanity.
It really makes you think about our impact on the planet.
For sure.
But this inclusion of humans really highlights how subjective this whole worst label is.
Right.
It all comes down to perspective, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Is it inherent to our nature to put ourselves at the center of everything?
Right.
Can we truly escape that bias and judge ourselves and other species objectively?
Those are tough questions.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into some of the other creatures that made this infamous list.
Right.
Up next, we have leeches.
Okay.
I have to admit, I get the heebie-jeebies just thinking about them.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, they've actually been used medicinally for ages.
You're right, they have.
Yeah.
And the source does mention this, but focuses mainly on the ick factor. What's fascinating is that for centuries, leeches were a legitimate medical tool used for bloodletting.
Really?
This practice, while now debunked, was considered a cure-all for many ailments.
Wow, so it's really all about perspective.
Totally.
What we might find disgusting today could have been seen as life-saving in the past.
Exactly.
All right, next on the list is the hyena.
Okay.
Our source kind of paints them as these lazy cowards that just steal from other predators.
Yes, the classic hyena stereotype.
Right.
The reality is much more complex.
Okay.
Hyenas are incredibly skilled hunters, and their scavenging role is actually vital to ecosystem health.
Really?
Yeah, they clean up carcasses, preventing disease spread.
Oh, wow.
And their social structures are incredibly complex, way more sophisticated than the source suggests.
So they're not just scavengers, they're sophisticated scavengers.
Oh, that's nice.
They're like the unsung sanitation crew of the savannah.
Right.
All right, let's talk about ticks.
Okay.
A disease-carrying bloodsucking.
Yeah.
Not a lot of redeeming qualities there.
Not for us, perhaps.
Right.
But even ticks have a place in the ecological web.
Okay.
They serve as a food source for some birds and reptiles, and their presence can actually help regulate populations of other animals.
Interesting.
It's all about balance.
Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah.
A lot of these worst animals actually perform vital functions in their ecosystems that we often overlook.
Exactly. It's easy to focus on the negative aspects of an animal's behavior without considering the bigger picture.
Yeah, speaking of judging based on limited information, let's tackle the age-old debate.
Now, here we go.
Wasps versus bees. Our source predictably says bees are good pollinators and wasps are just jerks. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's so much more to wasps than just stinging.
Really?
They're incredibly diverse with a wide range of behaviors and ecological roles.
Okay.
Some are pollinators, some are predators that control pest populations, and some even have symbiotic relationships with plants.
Wow.
It's a whole fascinating world beyond the sting.
You're making me feel bad for all those wasps I've swatted at over the years.
I know, right?
It seems like fear and annoyance often cloud our judgment when it comes to animals.
They absolutely do. They often react emotionally rather than taking the time to understand the complexities of the natural world.
Yeah, this list is full of examples of that.
Right.
Like take foxes, for instance.
Oh,
Why are they even on here? They're
Yeah.
just being foxes.
It seems like the source is confusing nuisance with inherently bad.
Right.
Foxes play a vital role in their ecosystems, controlling rodent populations, dispersing seeds.
Oh,
Our perception of them is often shaped by folklore and cultural biases rather than ecological reality.
it's funny. I was looking at this list and I noticed some glaring omissions.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Where are the rats?
Hmm,
The cockroaches.
good point.
Those guys seem like shoo-ins for the worst title, don't they?
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Perhaps it's a case of familiarity breeds contempt. We tend to vilify animals we encounter frequently, even if they're not objectively worse than others.
Yeah.
Rats and cockroaches are definitely pests, but they also play ecological roles, breaking down waste, providing food for other creatures.
So what you're saying is even the grossest, most annoying creatures have a purpose.
In the grand scheme of things, yes, it's all interconnected.
I'm starting to see a theme here.
What's that?
This list seems less about objective badness and more about human-centered annoyance and fear.
Precisely, it reflects our own anxieties and priorities rather than a true assessment of the animal kingdom.
Yeah, and a good example of this is how the source criticizes animals considered cute.
Oh, yeah?
Like pandas and polar bears.
Right.
It's like they're jealous of all the positive attention those animals get.
It really highlights how human perception can skew our understanding of conservation.
Yeah.
We tend to prioritize animals we find aesthetically pleasing, even if they're not necessarily the most ecologically important.
So are we saying that worst is a totally meaningless concept?
Not entirely, but it's important to recognize the inherent subjectivity of that label.
Okay.
What we consider bad is often driven by our own limited perspective, ignoring the complex roles these animals play in the larger ecosystem.
All right, dear listener, that's a lot to process.
Yeah,
Before we continue with this list, we want to hear from you.
right.
If you had to create your own list of worst animals, what would be on it and why?
Think about the criteria you're using.
Right.
Are you focusing on ecological impact, danger to humans, or personal annoyance?
Yeah.
It's a fascinating exercise in self-reflection.
We'll be back in just a bit to delve into more worst animal contenders from our source,
Yeah, we've got more.
including some surprising additions and even a few honorable mentions.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of so-called worst animals.
You know, as we go through this list, I'm noticing a recurring theme here.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like a lot of insects are getting a bad rap.
Insects. Yeah.
Mosquitoes, flies, termites, wasps, even fruit flies.
Right.
It's like a who's who of buzzing, biting, and generally annoying creatures.
Yeah.
I gotta ask, are insects really that bad?
Well, it's understandable why insects often elicit such strong reactions in humans, right? We associate them with disease, a general sense of unease.
Right.
But if we take a step back, we realize that insects are crucial to the functioning of ecosystems worldwide.
I mean, I guess when I think about it, they do a lot of important work,
Yeah.
pollinating plants, decomposing organic matter, controlling pest populations.
Exactly. They do a lot of the behind-the-scenes work that keeps the planet running smoothly.
Right.
Yet our first instinct is often to swat, spray, or eradicate them.
It's a good reminder that our feelings toward animals don't always align with their ecological importance.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of which, let's move on to some of the larger animals on this list.
Okay.
Up next, we have jackals.
Jackals?
The source compares them to foxes, saying they're both sneaky and destructive. Do they really deserve this reputation?
I think that's a bit of an oversimplification. Jackals are fascinating creatures with a unique ecological niche.
Okay.
They're opportunistic scavengers and hunters,
Hmm.
which means they play a crucial role in controlling prey populations and cleaning up carcasses.
So they're getting a bad rap for being efficient cleaners, just like hyenas.
Precisely.
Interesting.
They tend to romanticize predators that hunt large prey,
Right.
while overlooking the essential role scavengers play in maintaining a healthy ecosystem.
This next one is a head scratcher.
What is it?
Monkeys.
Monkeys.
The source seems particularly disgusted by macaques.
Oh, really?
even calling them a cross between a human and a rat.
Wow.
That's a prime example of how aesthetics can influence our perception of animals.
Absolutely.
Macaques are incredibly intelligent primates with complex social structures.
Yeah.
But because some people find them unattractive, they're deemed bad.
It seems pretty shallow to judge an entire species based on their looks.
I know, it's like the animal kingdom has its own popularity contest, and not everyone gets an invite.
Unfortunately, that's true. And this can have real consequences when it comes to conservation efforts.
Right.
Animals that are perceived as cute or majestic often receive more attention and resources,
Yeah,
while less appealing creatures are overlooked.
that's a great point. We need to be more aware of our biases and make sure we're supporting conservation efforts for all species,
Absolutely.
not just the ones that are easy on the eyes.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to another animal that often gets a bad rap, the anaconda.
Okay, anaconda,
Our source paints them as these vicious, aggressive killers.
which is a common portrayal of snakes in general.
Yeah.
But anacondas are actually ambush predators,
Oh.
meaning they lie in wait for their prey rather than actively hunting them down.
Hmm.
They're incredibly efficient at what they do,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not the mindless killing machines they're often made out to be.
So it's more about survival than aggression.
Exactly. They play a vital role in regulating prey populations within their ecosystems.
I'm noticing a theme here.
Oh, yeah.
Many of these so-called worst animals are actually performing important ecological functions that we just don't always appreciate.
Yeah.
It's like we're so quick to judge based on our fears and preconceived notions
Yeah.
rather than taking the time to understand the complexities of the natural world.
That's a keen observation.
Thanks.
It's easy to focus on the negative aspects of an animal's behavior without considering the bigger picture.
All right, let's tackle a couple more from this list.
Okay.
Next up, we have baboons, described as eating baby antelopes alive.
That's a rather gruesome image, but it's important to remember that baboons are omnivores.
Right.
Their diet includes fruits, insects, and, yes, occasionally small animals.
Okay.
It's a natural part of the food chain.
So it's not about cruelty, it's about survival.
Precisely.
Okay.
We tend to anthropomorphize animal behavior, ascribing human emotions and motivations to actions that are simply instinctual.
Okay, last one for this section, wolves. This entry is particularly interesting because it's not about the wolves themselves, but about their fans.
Ah, yes, the wolfaboo phenomena.
The source complains about the overratedness of wolves and the overzealousness of their fans.
Right.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's a reminder that enthusiasm can sometimes overshadow nuance.
Okay.
Wolves are apex predators that play a critical role in their ecosystems,
Right.
but romanticizing them to the point of ignoring their impact on other species
Mm-hmm.
can lead to an unbalanced view of conservation.
So it's all about finding that middle ground, right?
Yeah.
Appreciating the ecological roles of animals, even the ones we might not find particularly appealing,
Absolutely.
without letting our emotions cloud our judgment.
Well said. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
We need to be informed, but also open-minded and willing to see beyond our initial reactions.
We've still got a few more worst animals to unpack from this list.
We do.
Including some surprising contenders and even some animals that were suggested but didn't make the cut. We'll be back in just a bit to explore those in our final segment.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into worst animals.
We've got some interesting creatures to discuss in this last segment.
Yeah.
Some might surprise you.
You're telling me the first one on this list had me raising an eyebrow? Pigs.
Pigs.
I mean, I get that they can be messy, but are they really worst animal material?
Well, the source doesn't really give much of an explanation for their inclusion,
Right.
which I think speaks volumes.
Mm.
It really highlights how cultural perceptions can shape our views on animals.
Right.
In some cultures, pigs are revered,
Yeah.
while in others, they're seen as unclean.
It's a good reminder that worst is such a subjective term, influenced by our own backgrounds and beliefs.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one that's bound to spark some strong opinions, cats.
Oh, cats.
The source doesn't elaborate on why they're included.
Right.
But I have a feeling our listeners might have a few thoughts on this one.
Cats are definitely divisive. Some people adore their independence and aloofness,
Right.
while others find them cold and destructive.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the whole debate about their impact on bird populations,
Right.
which has led to some pretty heated discussions in conservation circles.
So are they heroes or villains?
Yeah.
Seems like the answer depends on who you ask.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how complex human-animal relationships can be.
Yeah.
It's especially when we try to balance ecological concerns with our emotional connections to certain species.
All right, this next one really threw me for a loop. Dogs.
Dogs are on the list.
The source simply states, if you like cats, you probably hate dogs, and vice versa. I don't know about you, but that feels like a gross oversimplification to me.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
While it's true that some people have strong preferences for one over the other,
Right.
that's not a black and white issue.
Yeah.
Both cats and dogs have been our companions for thousands of years,
Right.
and our relationships with them are much more nuanced and multifaceted.
I think it's totally possible to appreciate both cats and dogs for their own unique qualities.
I agree.
They each bring something special to the table.
For sure.
Speaking of unique qualities, let's shift gears and talk about the animals that were suggested as contenders for the worst list, but didn't quite make the cut.
You almost made a list.
Right. And this is where we find some familiar faces like rats and cockroaches.
Ah, yes. Classic.
Features that would likely top a lot of people's worst lists in the real world.
Probably.
Why do you think they were relegated to the sidelines here?
Well, perhaps the source felt that these creatures were already so universally disliked
Right.
that they didn't need a place on the main list.
Yeah.
It's almost as if they've achieved a level of infamy that transcends any need for further condemnation.
I guess everyone already knows how they feel about cockroaches.
Right.
No surprises there.
Exactly.
But there are a couple of other contenders that really caught my attention. Fleas and bedbugs.
Oh, those are good ones.
Talk about the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah. I can see why they would evoke such strong negative reactions.
Right.
Blood-sucking parasites that invade our homes and disrupt our sleep.
Yeah.
Not exactly a recipe for a good night's rest.
It is funny, though, they didn't even make the main list.
Right.
Makes you wonder about the criteria used to determine the ultimate worst offenders?
It really does.
It's
This
odd.
whole exercise just highlights how subjective these labels are.
Yeah.
What one person finds repulsive might be a mere annoyance to someone else.
Right.
It all comes down to individual perspective.
So after all this discussion about worst animals, have we reached any conclusions about what truly makes an animal bad?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that bad is a human construct. You know, we project our own values and fears onto the animal kingdom,
Yeah.
often overlooking the vital roles these creatures play in the grand scheme of things.
It's a powerful reminder to approach the natural world with a bit more humility and a lot less judgment.
Absolutely. There's always more to learn and appreciate about the natural world, even about the creatures we might initially find off-putting.
Well said. And on that note, dear listener, we leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
What would you include on your personal worst animals list?
Hmm.
And what does that say about your own relationship with the natural world?
It's a thought-provoking question to consider. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and complex world of animals.
We'll see you next time for another exploration of the incredible world around us.